It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's Georgia beat Tennessee time. Let's go. Today's video is brought to you by prizepicks.com, the kings of daily fantasy sports. Make sure you head over to prizepicks.com, get signed up, enter the promo code Uncle Lou. That's one word, uppercase letters without any spaces, Uncle Lou. Make any $5 play, and they're going to give you a $50 bonus instantly. Win or lose, free $50. Check them out, prizepicks.com, promo code Uncle Lou. Yeah, good morning, and that is Uncle Lou here. That's right, it is me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you with the annual Georgia versus Tennessee preview and prediction video. This is going to be amazing. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, especially you, Voltard man. Anyway, we are going to talk about the Georgia-Tennessee game today, and I'll give you my prediction at the end, but I mean, do we need to wait to the end? Georgia's beating Tennessee. Why? That's what Georgia does. They beat Tennessee. This game is in Athens at night. Must-win game for Georgia. They're sitting on 2 losses, taking losses on the road to Alabama and Ole Miss. Tennessee's only loss came on the road at Arkansas. The last time they played on the road, as a matter of fact. Tennessee's only played 2 road games this year, at Oklahoma and at Arkansas. Tennessee's big win, of course, coming at home against Alabama. A few weeks ago, Georgia has wins over Texas and Clemson. So it should be a good game. I'm a little surprised at the line. I'm not going to lie. Georgia's about a 10-point favorite in this one. It started around 8.5, went up to 9, 9.5, 10, even got as high as 10.5 or 11 last night or this morning. I checked right before I hit record today, and it's back down to 10. It looks like that's about where the number is probably going to settle. Is going to be somewhere around Georgia at a 10-point favorite, which is a little surprising to a lot of people. Of course, you know, it's a home game for Georgia, so that gives them a little bit of a boost, I guess. But 10 points, I'm not going to lie, that does seem a little bit high. We don't know if Nico's going to play the quarterback for Tennessee. Nico Iamaleava. I'm going to make a mistake. Whatever his name is. You know me, I don't really care. I don't name these people, so it's not my job to necessarily get their name right. I just do the best I can. We'll just call him Nico. Not sure if Nico's going to play or not. He suffered what Tennessee is calling a concussion last week at home against Mississippi State. He sat out the second half, and according to who you believe or who you read, he's practicing some this week or maybe not. He's ruled out or maybe not. You know how it is with these college football injuries. All the coaches, this isn't just a Josh Heupel thing. Believe me, Kirby Smart does the same thing. A lot of these coaches do the same thing. They treat these injury reports like government secrets. So I always take the approach, whether it's with Georgia or some other team, I don't believe anything I see or hear on any injury report, even if it comes directly from the head coach. I'll know for sure if Nico is playing or not when Tennessee takes the field the first time on Saturday. If Nico's out there, he's playing. If he's not, he's not. If he doesn't play, it'll be backup quarterback Gaston Moore, who does have a lot of playing time this year, because you got to remember back in the beginning of the year when Tennessee was scoring 70 points by beating up on a bunch of elementary schools, he got a lot of playing time in the second half. Also played last week against Mississippi State, so got some SEC action last week at home against Mississippi State. He played the entire second half. I believe he came in for a series or 2 against Alabama as well when Nico had to leave the game momentarily. I think he came in and threw an interception, actually, in that Alabama game. But outside of the big name associated with Nico, it's a name everyone knows because there's just been so much talk about him over the last couple of years, whether you're talking about the $8 million recruitment or the hype that Tennessee fans and media sort of threw at him unrealistically, I think, and he's proven it to be unrealistic this year. He has not been a great quarterback. He's played good. He, by no means, has lived up to the Superman-type level of expectation that Tennessee fans have been heaping on him for the last 2 years, but he has been a good quarterback. Nothing spectacular. But Tennessee's a running team. Tennessee is going to run the ball, whether it's Nico, whether it's Gaston Moore, or whether it's somebody else. They're going to snap the ball and they're going to hand it off to Dylan Sampson. I mean, that's what they've been doing all season long, whether Nico, Gaston, or anybody else has been in at QB. And they're very, very good at it. Dylan Sampson is one of the best running backs in the SEC. He might be the best running back in the SEC. He's got about 1,200 yards. I think he's up to 20 touchdowns, which is just an unbelievable number. Now, again, Tennessee is a very run-heavy team. There's been a misconception about Tennessee really for the last 3 or 4 years, that they're kind of an air it out, deep ball, take shots, spread you out, and throw the ball 80% of the time type of team. And they've never really been that under Josh Heupel. Now, they are more of a running team this year, I think, than I would classify maybe as years past with Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton. But they've never been a team that just lines up and airs it out 80% of the time. This is the best rushing game that they've had so far under Josh Heupel. So, like, when I look at Tennessee, Nico is getting a lot of talk this week because he's the quarterback. This is a top 10 matchup, top 12 matchup, depending on what ranking you want to look at, whatever. It's a big game, right? So with two highly ranked teams, and the quarterbacks are just who people tend to focus on. So I get it. But Tennessee is a team that's going to run the ball and play defense. That's what they've been doing all year long. In fact, when you look at their score totals this season, they're about half of what we're used to seeing from Tennessee teams under Josh Heupel. Again, if you take out the first 3 or 4 games against elementary schools in NC State, basically once they moved into SEC play, they've struggled to get to 20 and 30 points in a lot of these games. They beat Oklahoma 25-15. They beat Bama in a low-scoring game. Now, again, these are wins. I'm not saying this to knock Tennessee at all. I think it's pretty apparent, right? Tennessee is a better team today playing this brand of kind of a more of a complementary style of football than they were when Hendon Hooker was throwing for 400 yards a game and Tennessee was scoring 50 points a game, right? Wouldn't most people agree, even Tennessee fans, you're a better team today? Clearly, the defense is a lot better. They've got one of the best defenses in the country, honestly, whether you want to look at points per game, yards allowed, against the run, whatever it is you want to look at. They play really good defense, and they lean on Dylan Sampson to run the ball. Now, that's not to say that they can't throw it. A Josh Heupel team is always going to have the ability to throw it. They have suffered this season, Tennessee has, when it comes to throwing the ball, from kind of the same bug they've had pop up over the last few years, which is misses on deep balls. They connect on a few here and there, but if you watch the Tennessee games, there tends to be more misses than hits when it comes to the deep ball. Tennessee's biggest opponent, really over the last 2 or 3 years, has been road games. For whatever reason, and we see things like this in college football sometimes where there appears to be like really good teams that have this one sort of thing that for whatever reason they struggle to get over. And for Tennessee, if you were going to point to one specific thing, it would be road games. There's been years where Tennessee's defense maybe wasn't up to par. The Joe Milton year, you say, well, the quarterback play wasn't up to par. Maybe you look this year and you say, well, Nico's a first-year starter. He's making some first-year mistakes, not really where we want him to be. There are things like that you can find every single year with Tennessee. But the one constant that runs through every year under Josh Heupel at Tennessee is their struggles in road games. They have lost games to some bad teams on the road. Florida last year, of course, stands out like a sore thumb. Florida was just a terrible team last year, and Tennessee goes down there and loses for really no reason at all. You look at their 2 road games this year. They played Oklahoma and beat them 25-15. And while I'm never going to sort of look down on an SEC road win, at the time, beating Oklahoma 25-15 looked better than it looks now. Again, I'm not going to knock any road win. But it turns out Oklahoma is just a terrible team. If you remember, that was the game where Jackson Arnold first got benched because their offense was just so bad. And I think we credited Tennessee for that, rightfully so. But it turns out that Oklahoma's offense has been bad against every single team they've played this season. Again, that's not to take anything away from Tennessee. They obviously have a great defense. They've proved that week in and week out over the course of the season against every single team they've played. But then they had the Arkansas game the following week, and they just struggled to score. I think they scored 2 touchdowns in that game, and then they come back home and beat Alabama. It's a night and day difference. And again, Tennessee's not the only team or program that suffers from these almost anomalies, you'll call them, because Tennessee has otherwise been a top 10 program really the last 3 years, except for how they have performed on the road. They've had a home loss here or there. Georgia beat them at home last year, but typically they're winning at home and losing on the road. And yeah, sometimes it's a loss to a good road team, a loss to Georgia last year, a loss to Bama last year on the road. And maybe you're willing to accept that, but again, the loss to Florida, just completely unacceptable. And it would be easy to say, well, Tennessee just can't get over the Florida hump. It'd be easy to say that if it weren't the fact that they can't seem to beat anybody else on the road either. Losing to Arkansas was really, really unacceptable. Georgia has a similar problem, not a road problem. Georgia's got an Alabama problem, right? You're a Tennessee fan. If you're watching this video, you pay close attention to Alabama every year because you play them every year. And, generally Alabama's pretty good. But there's been several years over the last 4 or 5 years where Georgia was clearly better than Bama, but can't beat them. For whatever reason, Georgia just can't. It's something with Bama. Doesn't matter where they play, neutral site, in Birmingham, on the moon. It doesn't seem to matter where they play. Georgia does have the one win over them in the Natty a couple of years ago, but you know what I mean. Generally speaking, Bama is that one thorn in Georgia's side. For whatever reason, that's a hump they can't get over. With Tennessee, it's road games. They just really, really struggle. Georgia's been desperate for a road game, a big home game this season. Georgia's had a ton of big games. Clemson, Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss. These are all top 10 matchups when they were played. All of those teams are still ranked inside the top 20, but not a single one of those games was played in Athens. It's been, who has Georgia even played it? I guess Georgia played Auburn at home and Mississippi State at home. All of the big games have been on the road. So Georgia fans have been kind of hungry for a huge home game, and they're going to get it this Saturday night at 7:30. This is a massive game, of course, an elimination game for Georgia. And Georgia's problems this season are very well documented. The offense has been absolutely abysmal the majority of the season. They played really good in the second half against Clemson. They played really good in the second half against Bama. I thought they played pretty good against Mississippi State and even Auburn to a certain degree. Texas, the offense really didn't play that good against Texas. Now, Georgia got the win on the road there, 30-15. But if you go back and rewatch that game, the defense was harassing Quinn Ewers and eventually Arch Manning nonstop in that game. And it became a massive field position disadvantage for Texas. Texas was punting from inside their own 10-yard line. Georgia was getting the ball at midfield, short field situations, and Georgia was able to get to 30 points by playing field position and forcing a couple of turnovers. But let's not forget Carson Beck it gave Texas 3 turnovers of his own in that game, which, of course, is the biggest issue for Georgia this season, the biggest single issue, the play of Carson Beck. It just has not been what anybody thought it would be, Georgia fans or anyone else. You look at what he did last year compared to what he did this year, and it looks like 2 totally different players. It looks like he forgot how to play football. And obviously, going into any game, especially a big game, you don't want your team to turn the ball over, right? People talk about that all the time, talking heads, whether it's professionals on TV or idiots on YouTube like me. You say, well, you can't turn the ball over. I'm going to tell you, if you give me the choice between last week's Georgia offense versus Ole Miss and any other version of Georgia's offense I've seen this year, I'll take the any other version. And what I mean by that, if you watched the Georgia Ole Miss game, you probably already noticed, it was pretty clear that the only real strategy and game plan Georgia had offensively against Ole Miss was for Carson Beck not to turn the ball over. And how did they accomplish that? They accomplished that by just not allowing him to throw the ball downfield, period. Literally everything thrown at her behind the line of scrimmage. Carson Beck's average depth of pass was 4 yards against Ole Miss. Now, did it work? Well, it worked in that he didn't turn the ball over. He didn't throw 3 interceptions, right? He did throw 1 interception, but really that wasn't on him. He was hit as he was throwing the ball. It wasn't one of these poor decision-making things that we've seen Carson Beck do over the course of the season. So in that respect, you say, what a game plan worked. Carson Beck avoided the disastrous, boneheaded decision where he throws it right to the other team's player. That's not going to work. It didn't work. Georgia struggled. They had 10 points in that game, scored 1 touchdown, and that came off of an Ole Miss turnover where Georgia got the ball in plus territory and scored in 6 plays. After that, nothing for the rest of the entirety of the game, and it got basically blown out 28-10. Georgia's going to have to go out and just trust Carson Beck to sling the ball around. And if that means he throws 2 or 3 interceptions, then Georgia's going to have to lean on and rely on the defense to get him the ball back without giving up touchdowns in those situations. Force field goals, depending on where it happens on the field, right? If you throw a turnover and give Tennessee a short field, you got to bank on the defense holding them to a field goal. If he throws a turnover deep down the field, you hope your defense can force a punt. But I don't think you can handcuff Carson Beck in this game and expect to beat Tennessee. So that gets me to a key question here. How many points does Georgia need to score to win this game? I have a general rule of thumb. Heading into any game, you got to score 30. And one of the reasons I feel that way is because I believe in today's college football, if your defense holds the other team in the 20s, you should win the game 90% of the time. It's just a belief and a philosophy that I have. All of the rules and things in college football nowadays are bent towards helping the offense, right? You can't touch the quarterback. You can't even hardly look at him, or they call a roughing the passer penalty. You've got all the targeting and the pass interference stuff that happens downfield. On the RPOs and things, linemen are now allowed to move downfield even if the quarterback's going to throw the ball. There's just a lot of changes and developments in the world of college football over the last 10 years that have made it easier for the offense and harder for the defense. So I feel like if you hold an offense to 24, 26, 27 points, you should win that game 90% of the time. Now, obviously, there are plenty of scenarios you can find where teams give up 20 points and lose. Last week, for example, Georgia gave up 28 and lost. So it's not a guarantee, but that's kind of how I head into every game. I look at this one, and I'm wondering if 20 points might not be enough to win. Tennessee has really struggled offensively this year outside of Dylan Sampson. I expect Georgia, whether Nico plays quarterback or Gaston Moore plays quarterback, I expect Georgia to load up the box and dare Nico or Gaston Moore to throw the ball to beat them. Now, I'm not even convinced that loading up the box will be enough to stop or shut down Dylan Sampson completely, but if you're Georgia, you got to hope that will limit him. Georgia's going to have to get off the field on third downs, force some punts. If they do force any turnovers, the offense has got to take advantage and convert that into points. But I think Georgia wins this game. I think these are two really good teams. I think these are two potential playoff teams. They're both still alive for the playoff, obviously. Georgia with the 2 losses, Tennessee just with the 1. It's in Athens. It's at night. It's a must-win game for Georgia sitting on the 2 losses. They've had Tennessee's number. Tennessee hasn't beaten Georgia since 2016, and that's probably the worst Georgia team in the last 10 years. And one of the best Tennessee teams in the last 10 years. 2016 was really, really good team for Tennessee. 2022 was good. This team is good. But that 2016 was one of the best Tennessee teams in a long, long time. And it took a last-second Hail Mary for them to beat the worst Georgia team of the last decade. That was Kirby Smart's first year. Tennessee struggles on the road. Tennessee struggles overall with Georgia. Josh Heupel winless against Georgia all time. Must win back against the corner game for Georgia. I have a feeling Georgia finds a way to pull it out at home. I'm going to go to Dogs. I'm going to go with the Dogs to get the win in this one. I do think 10 points is probably too much. I would not bet Georgia minus 10 here. I never bet against Georgia, but there's no way I would bet Georgia minus 10. I think Georgia wins this game 27-20. Appreciate you watching. Have a good morning.